Media playback is unsupported on your device. Media caption: President Trump threatened a response like the world has never seen. A U.S. president has vowed to respond to North Korean threats with fire and fury like the world has never seen. North Korea, meanwhile, has threatened to fire off missiles at the U.S. island territory of Guam, home to 163,000 people. And all this comes amid reports that Pyongyang may have finally succeeded in miniaturizing a nuclear weapon that could fit on an intercontinental missile, a prospect long dreaded by the U.S. and its Asian allies. Is this a precursor to military conflict? Experts say you should not panic just yet. This is why this is one of the most important things to keep in mind. A war on the Korean peninsula serves Noon's interests. The North Korean regime's main goal is survival, and a war with the U.S. would seriously jeopardize it. As BBC defense correspondent Jonathan Marcus notes, any North Korean attack against the U.S. or its allies in the current context could quickly spiral into a wider war, and we have to assume the Kim Jong-un regime is not suicidal. In fact, this is why North Korea has been trying so hard to become a nuclear-armed power. Having this capability, it reasons, would protect the regime by raising the costs of toppling it. Kim Jong-un does not want to go the way of Libya's Muammar Gaddafi or Iraq's Saddam Hussein. Andrei Lankoff of Kookman University in Seoul told the UK's Guardian newspaper there was very little probability of conflict, but North Koreans were equally not interested in diplomacy at this point. They want to get the ability to wipe out Chicago from the map first, and then they will be interested in diplomatic solutions, Mr. Lankoff said. What about a preemptive U.S. strike? The U.S. knows that a strike on North Korea would force the regime to retaliate against U.S. allies South Korea and Japan. This would result in a massive loss of life, including the deaths of thousands of Americans, troops and civilians. Additionally, Washington does not want to risk any nuclear-tipped missiles being fired off towards the U.S. mainland. Finally, China, Pyongyang's only ally, has helped to prop up the regime precisely because its collapse is deemed to be a strategically worse outcome. U.S. and South Korean troops just across the Chinese border is a prospect that Beijing does not want to have to face, and that's what war would bring. Point 2. What you are seeing are words, not actions. President Trump might have threatened North Korea with language uncommon for a U.S. president, but this does not mean the U.S. is actively moving on to a war footing. As one anonymous U.S. military official told Reuters news agency, just because the rhetoric goes up doesn't mean our posture changes. New York Times columnist Max Fisher agrees these are the sorts of signals, not a leader's offhand comments, that matter most in international relations. Image caption: in a tense environment, a misinterpreted move could lead to war. What's more, after 2 North Korean intercontinental ballistic missile tests in July, the U.S. reverted to a tried-and-true tactic, squeezing Pyongyang through UN Security Council sanctions. And its diplomats are still speaking hopefully of returning to the negotiating table, pointing to support from China and Russia. These send conflicting signals to Pyongyang, but also moderate the tough rhetoric coming from President Trump. Still, some analysts say a misinterpreted move in the current tense environment could lead to an accidental war. There could be a power outage in North Korea that they mistake as a part of a preemptive attack. The United States might make a mistake on the demilitarized zone, Darrell Kimball, of U.S. think tank Arms Control Association, told the BBC. So there are various ways in which each side can miscalculate and the situation escalates out of control. Point 3. We have been here before. As former U.S. Assistant Secretary of State P.J. Crowley points out, the U.S. and North Korea came close to armed conflict in 1994, when Pyongyang refused to allow international inspectors into its nuclear facilities. Diplomacy won out. Over the years, North Korea has regularly made incendiary threats against the U.S., Japan and South Korea, several times threatening to turn Seoul into a sea of fire. And Mr. Trump's rhetoric in content, if not style, is also not exactly unprecedented from a U.S. president. In many different forms, albeit not as colorful, the U.S. has always said that if North Korea ever attacks, the regime will cease to exist, Mr. Crowley writes. P.J. Crowley were to now after fire and fury. The difference this time, he added, was that the U.S. president appeared to suggest he would take preemptive action, though Secretary of State Rex Tillerson later played this down. This kind of unpredictable, bellicose rhetoric coming from the White House is unusual and does have people worried, analysts say. Still, South Korea, the U.S. ally with the most to lose from a confrontation with the North, does not appear to be too concerned. A senior official from the presidential Blue House told reporters on the 9th of August that the situation had not reached a crisis level, and that it was highly likely it could be resolved peacefully. This is cause for optimism. Get news from the BBC in your inbox each weekday morning.